Hey guys, I'm here today to talk about something different today. I know I've been doing a lot of film director stuff for a little while, but I think I found what I'm looking for out of all this film. So I think I'm going to take a hiatus on that and just do miscellaneous topics moving forward as I make videos, which is not going to be as frequent, honestly, because now I'm really kind of getting into the meat of making this film and editing. And I've been doing a lot of this like in the process of editing, but now I kind of just want to get full gear on with like kind of filming these upcoming next two acts of the film that I really want to get down. But I do want to talk about my favorite book of all time. This is the book that's impacted my life the most, in a sense, and it's called Awareness by author Anthony de Mello. And what this possesses is just my most impactful reading of just spiritual expressionism. And generally, I don't really like a lot of books that feel like it's telling you what to do, but this book doesn't tell it what to do whatsoever. This basically just lays out a perspective that comes with a bit of harshness, but it ultimately is just mixing Christian spirituality. You have Buddhist parabolism, a Hindu perspective, and then just a lot of psychological insight in general, and it ultimately comes into words of hope. That really is a grand synthesis, I think, for an ultimate perspective to live by. And this did change my life when I read it about 5 years ago. And this is one of those films, I find this really does reflect my quiet lifestyle in so many ways. And, the highs and lows of it in many ways. This is really just gets in depth of the depths of illusion, being aware, and there is a bit of a harshness to the way he says it, but I think that I realize that some of my directors are my favorite directors are being a little harsh in their undertone. So I feel like here's a guy who makes you harsh, but he makes you feel it. It comes from a place of feeling, and I think that's what I relate to the most in a book's in a novelistic sense. And this is certainly a challenging read, so I will say if I'm reading any of this and it sounds like I'm being too harsh in any kind of way, know that this is just kind of what way it's impacted me, and I feel like this has changed my life. So if that's not your thing, hey, it's all good. I don't ever expect, anyone like, oh, I hope they watch this video. I'm just throwing it out here. If you're interested, yeah, but I'm going to really get depth into just how this book spiritually changed me, and my perspectives for the better in a lot of ways. If it hits you too, cool, if not, okay, cool too. But yeah, I'm just going to get in depth with just every little thought that this book kind of took me through in a lot of ways. Just kind of how it made me think about my life in a lot of ways. What this book really made me question is, am I truly waking up in this life? It does get into a lot of, like, are we actually kind of living in a perspective that best fits our state of happiness? And then it kind of questions, is that even what we're ultimately seeking in our journey? Is it happiness, or is happiness a very psychological thing ultimately, and it's a spiritual connection rather? Like, I think that this is a really good book that gets into the selfishness that comes with having a spiritual relationship with something of a higher power, while recognizing something of a psychological insight on all of this too. I think that's the part that I can really resonate with, like a deeply spiritual impact that also is aware of a certain psychological depth of it all as well, and it kind of marries the two in the most beautiful way. I think that's the basis of a lot of grounded mysticism. And this is a book that encourages you to just unlearn every perspective as you've ever known it before, and completely lend yourself to something new. Just altogether, it's nice to remove yourself from how you observe your overall environment. And I feel like if you can remove yourself from that on a consistent level, that's how you really are a free bird inside. And that's one of the best parts, like this is a thing that takes you through just sort of like looking past illusion and just sort of getting to the basis of like a higher power always being around us, to the extent that even like, yes, we're all like little components, and that's sort of like can be a harsh thing, but a little thing that ultimately also is kind of showing how everything's temporary, because often enough, as people are people, everybody has a depth of just good within, but then there's also can be a rotten within too that lives, so you have to ultimately kind of grasp that whenever a person truly feels negative towards another person, then this is an insecurity that lives within yourself, not the other person. If something's actually getting under your skin, then there's something you're insecure about, and they basically are a mirror of what you almost are envious about. So this is a sort of questioning, how do you get past that? How can you be happy? And the best way to be happy is if you just let go of the illusion of honor, honestly, and realize that it's entirely societal and not real, and that honor is completely meaningless in the end. That's kind of a perspective that actually makes it easier to maintain honor when you have to. If you just see it, that you don't need to be worried about it so much. If you worry too much about honor, and I'll say, like, I've been guilty of this. Whenever I say all this, I'm not trying to even say I'm above, like, a lot of those things. If I sound like that, I just know that it's because I've been on the weak side of it, before. and I'm still it could be, but I'm just gonna say it kind of how it taught me. I'll let the flow for me how this book taught me, so to help anyone who's watching if they're interested or whatever they want to feel from it. But yeah, it's only easier to do this if you're just not worried about being caught up in stuff like that. I just feel like there is about 3 things in general that are very difficult for humans to grasp, I think, in general. This is like a challenge that all humans are capable of this, but it is something that takes effort to be true about, on a consistent basis. That is, 1, returning love for hate, 2, including the excluded, and 3, admitting that you're wrong. And it's like, these are hard things to do, but no matter how much you feel hate in your bones, all your hate is your insecurity. So if you can just turn that into love in your own way, everyone has to find their way of doing this. You'll find yourself wanting to include the excluded. You'll find yourself in a state where you just want to admit that you're wrong. Like whenever you are, you don't need to be right all the time necessarily. After a while, you get locked into something that can be dark. So you have to kind of see, even if you're a genius, you're a limited genius too. You're limited as can be. So this is like kind of showing how, and ultimately, if you possess fear, that's generally the root of violence. Because I believe that people are generally very animalistic. So if you're afraid on a consistent level, then violence is kind of what's going to come out of you if you're in the heat. So I think it's kind of a book that encourages not to let yourself become too afraid or paranoid, because then you get too kind of wrapped up in a concept that isn't necessary for building your best self, but it's going to happen. But I think it's meant to equip you for those worst moments. Honestly, that's all it's all about in an intuitive kind of sense. Again, it's just the more you can kind of drop these perspectives of labels, the happier a person's generally going to be. They say it's not even about seeking an ultimate truth, really. It's about just loosening up on your perspective of opinions. That's really what it is. Because when you have theories can become very much a singular perspective, and that's not always going to mesh with the public prevalence. So in a lot of ways, you just that's where the root of a lot of madness. So if you just drop that and seek not truth. You're not seeking the ultimate truth inside your interior. You're just seeking a desire to drop your opinions, and a desire to no longer have a harsh thought about something. I just want to be loose and free of my perspective of everything around me, no matter how bad it's been before. You just kind of have to drop and separate yourself. Whenever, because if you're really suffering all the time, then you ultimately are not in touch with the ultimate truth. And it's so hard. But I think that there is an obstacle to happiness, and if you can see this, I think it's just important to always hold on to preserve this and to spread to others in a way that you can do your best for yourself. And what's the obstacle to happiness is to see that happiness is actually our natural state. And, in a lot of ways, we're born with happiness. And I don't even think it's something that's fully acquired, but it's just something that you just have to get in touch with by being able to drop, your dark emotions, drop everything temporarily and find this in yourself. And it's like, if you don't, and I think the only way you can really do this is if you're not pretending that you're this awake person. You need to kind of just live it, in your own kind of way. Because when you live it in your own kind of way, if you really feel as good as this higher power knowing feels, then you'll do the right thing when the time comes. You just have to believe in this and kind of put your faith in complete honesty whenever you're communicating with this good. And I think this doesn't, it's not encouraging, but it is not against having completely dark thoughts and having those days where you're not seeing or feeling it at all. This is just kind of what saying. This is almost like written from a perspective of, okay, this is what it was like whenever I was seeing it. So, and it's really just kind of saying that it's possible for your life to be easy and delightful. It really is possible, but the hardships that come are generally from illusions that we create. We create fantasies in ourselves so harshly that it's going to come full circle and reality kicks in, and you feel ultimately depressed because you couldn't break through your barrier. You kind of wanted to see something so harshly that you can't even, that's not even real. And now and then it also kind of makes you over ambitious too. So it's like it challenges you into I'm thinking that people with competitive thinking. It's like I'm thinking that they're better than you and stuff. That's what makes it hard. Because you have a lot of competition. You're all around a heat, so it's impossible to let loose in any kind of way. Maybe you're greedy. You want something that another person has, so that makes you even more angry. You crave it basically. So it's like envy. That's really one of the most difficult, complex topics, I think. The nature of envy and just being jealous in general. I think that it really takes a lot of willpower and strength to move past those kind of feelings, but it's absolutely important for a walk because I think, yeah, and just especially makes it clear that holding on to these kind of thoughts are ultimately what lead to a personal downfall and defeat. And it also is a book that encourages no more apologizing all the time. It's easy in a lot of ways to feel like you have to apologize for yourself, but you really don't. It's more like you're too good for this world, and you need to, yeah, just believe in believe in what the best qualities of yourself, and see that you're an awake person. So like if you can like see this, like there's something woken up about you. So you don't have to ever apologize for being your best self, no matter how a person may make you feel for doing so. And ultimately, there are 4 steps to gaining further wisdom. And I would say number 1 is just having, or no, he's saying, I'm just reciting kind of the way he says it. Wow. But number 1, awareness of negative feelings. And that's really important because it kind of talks about, I think, to define some negative feelings. I kind of would write down the most negative feelings I ultimately face is that is over the top moodiness that isn't necessary, but it's like you're just holding on so hard to something. Maybe it's something of a self-hatred, and then self-hatred is also just a really hard burden because it's like if you hate yourself, there's no way you have love to spread, or you're not going to get in. You're just not going to have a good time necessarily if you just always live in a state of self-hatred. Even though it's easy to have the tendency to do so, sometimes feel guilty, like I just really feel like shame or something like of a regret from something of a past, that didn't hold up or something like that. It's also easy to kind of just see life as just completely pointless, just to see that, oh, wow, okay, like none of this had any kind of meaning whatsoever. So it's about, and I get it, like nihilistic thinking. And I think this book also kind of understands a lot of nihilistic thinking, but it also can see that to see it as pointless is ultimately just very like it can be defeating and too defeating. You have to kind of see that it's not everything, and hurt feelings in general, just feeling all nervous and intense in general. That's like, yeah, man, okay, wow. As I'm reading through this, I confess, I got to work through, and that's why I think I do these videos. I think I need to build a certain courage to just talk, and I've seen through the process that, okay, well, can you talk like this around people in reality? That's what I've had to build up, and that's, yeah, I'm getting there, by doing this. This is honestly, help my confidence a lot. But in general, it's not good to be nervous and tense all the time. It's like whenever you're out, you want to genuinely feel a light within yourself and spread it, in a way that's contagious, and you just do it your way. I think that's what the journey is really communicating. And the second one is separation of all feelings, and this can be tricky, but it's kind of seeing that all feelings you possess are within yourself, not reality. So it's about kind of seeing how all your feelings are an illusion in a sense, even if it is real to you. And I believe that's optimistic, although it may sound pessimistic. But that what this is really communicating is that nobody can really hurt you. Nobody actually has the power to get too deep into who you are. All of that is within yourself, and that's just kind of what brings you into like such a harsh state in the first place. And then the number 3 is just to never really identify with a certain feeling if it's harsh for you. It's like if you feel depressed, it's like time to just say that feeling is depressed. You're not depressed. The feeling is depressed. And even if you're happy, it's like maybe like if it's overboard for a case like mine, this may be just good for a lot of people to hear. But it's like if you're happy, that happiness is a separation from reality almost. But it's real to you. But it's like it's about how you spread that in others in the moment. But it's kind of saying that nothing really ever justifies a negative feeling immediately. If a person is really at this state of mind, nothing can make you feel too bad. You don't really have to do anything to achieve this. Just it's all about perspective, really. Just finding perspective and finding it in a sense of just looking at life in a sense of addition rather than subtraction. See life as I want more. I want to feel more. I want to see more. And then I think that whenever you do that, I guess number 4, we just always want others to change so much so that we can feel better. But that's never going to happen. And I think this is something I've always hated this, but I understand a lot of people literally want to completely change other people's perspective so they can feel better. But it's kind of saying that it'll never happen in the end. Ultimately, I think that in truth, you're never going to 100% change a person. So I think that and it's okay if you feel like you can change a person in a certain way. I'm not saying you can't, but just if you think that you're 100% going to change a person, then that's what it's like. That will never happen. I think that does require a certain shift in perspective in order to kind of move past that. Like like, see that, okay, like this is you, like the person might have brought something big out of you, but this is you ultimately. It's hard, like it's not easy, but it's kind of also just communicating that the perspective of I feel good because everything around me is feeling good is kind of a flawed perspective. Instead, it's more like you want the world to look good because you feel good. This should be a you thing, first off, and this is kind of what it's trying to say, like, just all artists and all history have been ultimately getting to the core of. It's about you feeling good rather than the world being good in the end. And it does communicate that is a foundation of spirituality and knowing and awareness in a lot of ways. And it's just kind of saying that the reason you have to have nihilism is because nothing will ever explain every bit of suffering, evil, torture, destruction going on in this world. Nothing can ultimately, and it's all a mystery. So it's about kind of just accepting that you're never going to make sense out of all this. Really, like all of this is always going to be a very flawed thing. Really, it's going to be a very flawed outlook. And it takes a person to kind of see this in their own way. Like it just really, you really can't save the world, basically. Like I think that there is a foundation of you can in a psychological sense, yes. I'm not saying you can't save the world, but you can't. I think thinking in terms of overcoming these terms of basically like being above suffering, above evil and torture. It's like these are powerful forces that are above humanity, basically. So it's like you have to have a wall of mystique in order to be happy and find your own, like. What if you want to know something of a higher power, and then spread it, in your way. But you'll never make sense of all this tragedy out there. That's a big mystery, But so the best thing you can do is just swing into action and come from a place of sincere love. Don't just don't come from a place of just wanting to get rid of your negative feelings. I think that's a trap that can be easy to fall into. You feel bad, so you just I gotta do this because I feel crappy. But no, it's like you do it because you love it, basically. Because we view everything around us in terms of concepts of a particular concept. Know that like everyone around you is viewing everyone around them differently than how you are seeing them. It's like this is I think one of the best things to understand. It's like this is how we are. Everything you see is how you are. Literally, like you are your. And I know that could almost be like yeah, but for real though, it's like yeah. Everything is. This is like every single thing you're seeing is. It's almost trying to say that it's almost limited, but it's also true. In a lot of ways. And part of just doing this whole waking up is just kind of seeing it as you are, really. Just seeing life as you see fit, basically, comes down to it in a lot of ways. It's okay to completely rearrange perspectives. By saying this illusion, it may seem depressing, but breaking through it is ultimate joy and happiness, the best feeling. And you can ultimately warp your perspective to see it as you are. Nothing selfish whatsoever about that. The only thing that's selfish is if you just demand that someone else sees it exactly the way you see it. That's the thing that I think is really important. I really do despise the idea. Hey, and I hate it, so I'm insecure. But I really do despise the idea of people just like really trying to rearrange how a person thinks, remold how a person lives. I don't like that. I've never liked that. I'm always insensitive to that, and I'm really glad that this book agrees with this. Like, 100%. You literally are smarter. It literally can make you. I think lessen. Like you can like harden your own intelligence. I think to be under what someone else is. You have to see it as you see fit because it literally does bring your best qualities out. Like to actually make the impact happen for a worldwide and through a universal language. Another thing to note is that, it also communicates the nature of stillness, and it says that people are typically going to be very reactionary whenever they're not in the state of higher knowing and awareness. Like typically you're going to be very fast paced, just like, holy crap kind of thing. And also it's also kind of also a perspective that's trying to help you see that nobody's ever been mean to you ever. It's actually impossible for a person to be mean to you is kind of what it's saying. It's just that they're only mean to their perspective of you. So like to kind of know all this is to see that in everybody around you. It's like how limited all judgment is towards a person. Nobody's mean to you, like really. That's the thing. Like you may feel it, and it may have happened, but it's possible to separate and see that they were simply mean to a projection. They were not mean to the human soul that lives inside of you. The beauty inside of you. It's like no, they didn't get to know that side of you. And daydreaming is okay, It's kind of communicating that, because I do think there's an ultimate dark side to daydreaming, but it's kind of saying that there's a light side too, and it's okay to get lost in the thought and drift for a while. But the dark side comes from losing your consciousness completely. Which, yes, I'm extremely guilty of doing that. So, diving too hard into fantasy, it's like, because I live in fantasy, I have to recognize that, okay, there's a flaw in this too. So, again, you don't want to lose consciousness. You have to know, I think, something of God, which is why I like to read a lot of these books. I know I'm a film addict, but I like diving into a lot of music and a lot of, spiritual readings in my free time. I'm wanting to read more fictional things. So that's what I'm building up to in my 30s. As I'm watching, like, building more of these films. I see how many directors are built on the foundation of reading. This is the book that brings me to. Again, I'm such a get to the point. I think it comes with the film side. So I think this book just resonates with just kind of that perfect outlook that I needed. But yeah, it's kind of saying that there are 3 ways of knowing God. First is in the creation, just taking in everything around you in your momentary day-to-day walk and seeing the creation around you. Know God's actions throughout history. I need to get much, that's what I could brush on, to really know ultimately. But number 3 is the highest form of the knowledge of God. I believe fully in that side of it. Is always have the ultimate knowing of God, know the creation. Now I need to be a better reader, because I'm always such an in the moment kind of guy that it's hard for me to, genuinely, it comes from a place of ADHD. So it's funny, I'm reading movies all day, but, by way of subtitles, but yeah, that book format, I need to get better at being more patient with more stories. And they ultimately are equally rewarding. I know a lot of artists would say it's ultimately just as good, maybe even better. They say, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time, the one who knows does not say, and the one who says does not know. Yeah, I think that speaks for itself. That's really interesting. That's maybe harsh and cold, but they say that the more that you say, the more you're revealing of your cards. And if you're revealing too much to certain types of people that don't get it, they're going to be like, okay, they're going to just think of you as someone who just is, they're going to look at you as a lesser knowing type of person. You don't want to be around that kind of crowd. Like, whenever you talk freely, you want to be 100% accepted for who you are, none of this, judgment, basically, you could say, judgment of character. Judgment of character can kind of really drain, I think, a good spiritual connection. And then, the highest knowledge of God is really just to kind of know God as an unknowable force. Really, that's the best way you can know God in the highest form. I think that, I think it's a very, very commonly agreed thing that, a lot of people get very drained of just someone who's just always yapping about God. That's very exhausting. And I'm always questioning why in a lot of ways, within my walk. So, but I ultimately come to a realization of it's just, I think the irritation becomes from, a lack of wanting to drop, your own illusions and your own errors. People don't want to admit that they're wrong in their actions. You just want to think that you're right all the time. And that ultimately kind of leads to over-attachment to a certain feeling that's not real. And it can kind of make you out of touch with the cruelty around you. That's what I can't get. How do you let go of cruelty? So it's that just shows, I think cruelty just is always around you. So I think that a certain knowing of that, while still being happy in your own way, is what it comes down to. And I think it's not, because none of this, I believe in the religion thing. I think a lot of this religion thing is what makes people mad in the first place. I think it's entirely a spiritual angle, not a religious angle. And I think that losing yourself into something, and I think living hard in the fantasy, it's kind of realizing that you're something other than what you thought you were. I think that's the pure basis of diving into fantasy, to see yourself as something of a superior version of for what you really are. That's kind of what it feels like. But if you can kind of lend yourself to the right amount of suffering, you can grow, and you'll find growth, and you'll actually find your harmony. I think, and you can rise to maturity, basically. I see that this is kind of the perspective that's great for just finding your pleasant experiences in life. And if you can let yourself suffer, then you can find, the more you suffer, the more pleasantness, you can appreciate. And if you can just do that in a mental, psychological way, instead of getting into dangerous situations, that's even better. You can almost mentally take yourself to these kind of depths, they're intense, but you can make it delightful because it was so raw, and just living in, everything that's real expression is about a person. That's kind of what living feels like. I think negative feelings are great because they're actually useful for coming to this better knowing. So that's why I'm just as fascinated by bad things as I am good and ugly things too. It's all fascinating because it's all part of what's around, and to not look at that is to feel a certain suppression within. So negative feelings are useful for understanding this better. And I think that, a lot of the reason people, I think, want to have negative feelings is because there's a certain suppression of a desire within. And it comes down to, if there's something you want that you can't have, you just have to understand it in your kind of way. That's where you have to have God. You have to understand it. Something that may seem unfair, but you have to get it. You have to move past it, because if you feel a desire all the time, then you're endlessly tied to it. If you're endlessly tied to it, it's terrible. If you have to let go of something, even if you're like, that's yeah, simply, it's like, because I think that if if you're always tied to something, then you're going to start seeing things not as seeing things through another window, and that's not you anymore. And once you lose yourself fully into that kind of fantasy, it's okay to do that to an extent, but I think that going too far into it and not seeing your walk in it is to renounce, the truth, literally. And they say that if you really want to keep on living, you have to kind of separate yourself from all this fantasy and not actually rest. Know that you're actually in a dark place, but your fantasy is guiding you, and you're living the love in moments. But you feel the heat of it just as well through your nights and day, in your walk as well. But you have to learn how to flow with it. You just keep going, no matter what hits, no matter what comes your way. And it talks about like music in a lot of ways too, and how and I think often enough, typically any kind of creative artist, spiritual type, is interested in music. So, because what I think you're looking for is a note that is just right. A note that's right that you didn't know. It's like unlocking something within, unlocking a note within. And I think the best music for me is just stuff that feels like it's always searching for the right note, rather than saying that it's found the right note. It's just a voice that endlessly communicates that we're searching. We don't know, but we are searching. Basically, so by searching, we do know, though. You build it that way. Because happy, but happiness. That's because happiness, I think, is the ultimate key in a lot of ways. But I think that true happiness is just not whatever most people would define as happiness, which is excitement, thrills. I don't think that's happy. I think that's suffering. But happiness, I think, can be found through enough of that suffering. If you can kind of just find exactly what to feed your soul with, feed your soul basically with good, as opposed to like just bad crazy things. Basically, that's like, I think that's just pure and simple. Like what you feed into your soul is what will come out of you in the moment of dialect and conversation. And they say that not even the greatest person, the person you look up to the most, can do this. Can see this for you. You have to entirely do this for yourself, and it's so hard. And I know it's hard, but it's so real to just see it that way. It's so much better. And it's kind of saying how enlightenment is something that can be achieved by just moment-to-moment contact with reality. It's like, yes, and again, I'm a huge lover of living in a grounded sense of fantasy, but you have to connect with reality. You have to be able to converse, with people at a consistent level, and know that this moment-to-moment contact is what's keeping you intact and giving you a purpose. Because what's the point of all this fantasy if you can't do anything productive with it? Hey, I'm guilty, but even through the making of this, film I'm seeing. A lot of this, I think I can do it now, but I might get away with it now. But in my 30s, I do need to kick it a little harder. I'm just kind of going through a bit of a bridge of perspective shift in my life. And this book is a very, very timeless foundation, because this is every bit as even more important to me now than it was 5 years ago. So kind of going through all this, but it just kind of says that generally, you're a free bird if you just smash the nature of concepts around you. If you can just let go of that, then you're a free bird. You're good to go. And ultimately, if you possess a sense of dislike for anything around you, then you're just afraid of it, basically. And I think that through art and through all these kind of other kind of spiritual perspectives, you can kind of get past that, and you can kind of just learn to like something that you're afraid of in the weirdest kind of way, and that kind of just brings you to it. It's like, okay, that's there. I've basically been walking around knowing that something horrible is out there, but I don't know what it is. But once I see it, it's like, oh. So, often enough, they say that labels really do kind of harden a lot of innocent perspectives, because they say that whenever you put too much of a word around something you love, then you're never going to see it the same way again. That's kind of an interesting perspective here. It's like, you're basically kind of saying that if you kind of teach a person too much information, if you know too much information about something that's not like completely your ballpark, then it's just like you're almost just never going to see the same. You're going to almost get bored with it rather than fascinated. So I think it's about finding a sense of minimalism and how you present, whatever topic that you are passionate in love with, and think as if, okay, the people around you are not in love with this. Come on, but you have to communicate. If you can't do that, then no one's going to care anymore. Um, and also, what's really important is if you can just live through other concepts for a while and come back to your own heart, more sharpened and remodeled, then every single thing around you is eternally unique. And that is the closest, I think, feeling to heaven on earth. And just never be bored. And that's all I want to feel in my life. Just never be bored. I hate being bored in any kind of way. I just want to kind of live in a way that's always kind of connected to this knowing. And seeing that, putting a concept of things and labels are just very, very, it's going to freeze you up into living the fullest extent of the moment that you are capable of. You know, if you want a moment to really happen, it's about just letting reality flow and seeing that reality is whole. But applying the concepts and too much labels is what can kind of fragment you to a harsh reality that you didn't even want to be in the first place. So I think if you can just let go of that and let a moment flow, then you're ultimately in a state of happiness. And they say that all these words, nothing I say, nothing anyone says, is actually giving you an answer. All we're doing is pointing a finger, and if you resonate with it, that's cool. If not, then that's cool too. That's why it comes down to that, because, yeah, these words are not reality. This is an illusion too, there's a walking illusion. Everyone's an illusion, so, but, all we're doing is pointing a finger. So the way you can break out of feeling completely crappy is to just simply look around. You got to spend hours sometimes when you feel in your lowest depths, just looking around at everything around you. Look at the face of people around you and their momentary little moments, and if the way that strikes you, maybe. That's not to say the stock, but it is to just observe it at an impersonal level, to see that you're not the only person alive. And look at the shape of trees. Really observe all these birds as they're in flight. Look at the pile of stones around you. Look at the grass as it grows. Look at everything around you and see that you have to be thrown out of your paradise in order to return to it better. Eventually living in a paradise forever does feel kind of rotten in a weird way. So I think to know certain tragedy, to know pain and hurt, brings you closer to paradise in the long run. It's about how you look at it and mold your perspective towards it. And they say that if you're feeling bad, maybe it's because you have a lot of craving inside. Whenever you crave something so much, you're going to live in a state of sorrow, and that's miserable. And I think that if you just no longer travel and are always living a way where you're living, like a state of craving, then you're going to arrive at your destination. Be above your cravings is what it comes down to. It's like have everything intact as far as that goes, because that's the root of sorrow inside. You have to think above those kind of thoughts, because they're harsh. They say that the harder you try to change yourself, the worse it's going to get. So you kind of have to just be honest with yourself and see that, if you're in a particular kind of like ugly perspective, it's in you, and you just have to get better. You have to be better than that. You have to resist temptation sometimes. And the more you resist. But the more you ignore it, though, the more power you're going to give it ultimately. That's what I also believe in. I believe that if you ignore anything about yourself, then it's going to come back to you later. So to be honest with yourself in the moment is kind of, I think, what it takes to actually change and rise above it, especially if it's a bad thing. Because, it's your life. Like if you've been around violence, then of course, you're going to be felt this way. If you've been around the heat, if you've been around something that isn't right for you, it can lead to build up to a certain torment within yourself, then it is hard to change. But you just have to find your own way of resisting it if it's not good for you, because you need to have good things all around you in order to be in your best state and be an impactful person for the better and live to your best state. Know higher power, and be able to cope with evil. You can't fight evil. You just have to understand it. I think that's the foundation of intuition and all this art, all the good things. Just understand rather than fight. If you fight anything, it leads to something worse. So just understand it. That's awareness. Yeah, this is a book that really impacted me. If you have any thoughts about any of this, or want to further, offer how your perspectives might fit or maybe not fit with this, I'd be always happy to discuss this particularly. I've never talked about this book with anybody, so I'm kind of just throwing this out with my own raw personal thoughts and walk I kind of had along with reading this book. But yeah, I highly recommend reading it, honestly. And I think especially if you're not religious particularly, I think it's even better because, but you are perhaps spiritually searching for something within it searching. And I think this is a book that perfectly mirrors someone who may think that way, and maybe why the ultimate foundation of being, in a particular lens is always going to scar rather than help in the end, because it might be limiting and knowing that you're actually called to. You might be suppressing something within that was ultimately for the better for you, for your smarter, happy, and smoother qualities to come out. So yeah, highly recommend this book. I think it also has some great poetry as well. So I highly suggest checking a lot of that out as well. It's some of the greatest stuff ever, honestly. Yeah, so perfect book.